Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, joined by attorney Stephen Jessup, and we're going to talk about one of Stephen's resolved cases against Mutual of Omaha. And Stephen, in these cases, we like to talk about the background, the history of the claim, how you help the claimant, your strategies, and then provide some tips for people who may have a Mutual of Omaha claim that will help them in the future. So give us a little bit of the history on this claim.
Yeah, so my client was an operations manager for a large office building. Essentially, he was in charge of the ins and outs of everything. It was like a high-rise, so a commercial high-rise. So all the maintenance workers overseeing the entire building. And then he was suffering from multiple, back problems, a lot of chronic low back problems, herniated discs, radiculopathy. Had a very physical job. He was basically on his feet all day. And when he contacted our office, his claim had been denied by Mutual of Omaha. They'd argued that, hey, we determined that your job is a light duty occupation, and our doctors are of the opinion that you're able to perform at a light duty, so you should be able to go back to work.
And how did they make the determination that his job was light duty?
So under the policies, and most of these policies, when it's talking about your own occupation or regular occupation, it's how it's performed in the national economy. So they have their people, their vocational experts, go ahead and take a look at how the Department of Labor would define it, either through the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, ONET, or some of these other occupational resources. And there's just, a generic determination of what the job duties are and what the demand level for that job is.
Did they ever approve the claim?
Yes, he was initially approved, and then it was only a couple months into it, maybe about 8 or 9 months into it, when they denied the case.
And what was the basis for their denial at that point?
At that point, just peer review. So they had their own doctors look at updated records, and were of the opinion that he'd be able to, which, there was nothing when I was doing the appeal and looking at the medical records that would have supported, some type of recovery that would have seen him be able to return to his job.
What is a peer review, and why can Mutual of Omaha rely on a peer review to deny benefits?
A peer review is a doctor who just reviews your medical records. They don't examine you. Often they won't speak to your doctors. They just go ahead and look at what's in your file. Most insurance companies will go that route. Now, even though they have the right and the ability to send you for an independent medical evaluation, I find 85% of the time they're not going to do that. And so they just rely on a doctor to go ahead, review the file, and if it gives enough of an opinion, then that'll basically set in motion a denial. Part of the reason why I think they do it this way is, A, they want to see if people are going to put up a fight. They've got nothing to lose in denying the case, meaning that if they're wrong and you're put back on claim, they just owe you the money they didn't pay you. So there's really no financial disincentive to do, shortcut things when coming to review your claim.
And what was the extent of the claimant's injuries? You said it was a back injury. Was there a surgery or no surgery?
There was no surgery. It was recommended. He didn't want to go through the surgery. Had to do with, he wasn't young, but he wasn't old, and the concerns were from his doctor, well, if we fuse this section of your lumbar spine, in time these other sections are going to become problematic. So we'd like you to reduce what you're doing physically, conservative treatment, things like that.
All right, so what plan of action did you take once you were retained on the file?
The first thing we always do is we get a copy of the claim file, and in the claim file, that's anything you've ever submitted to the insurance company or that Mutual of Omaha created as part of its review. That included the vocational reviews, the medical reviews, so we got to see everything they had that led to this determination. So that's always first and foremost. And since we weren't involved prior to the denial, getting all the medical records, making sure too that Mutual of Omaha has all of them, and then looking as to what can we do to kind of further strengthen the appeal, our arguments, and that led us to doing it, especially giving his job being as physical as it was, and the nature of his conditions of functional capacity evaluation.
And what was the functional capacity exam, and what were the results of that in this case?
Yeah, so the functional capacity evaluation is, again, going back to this idea of Department of Labor standards for work: sedentary, light, medium, heavy, very heavy. And it's a test that was done with a physical therapist, lasts about 2 to 3 hours, and it's meant to extrapolate, during the testing, to extrapolate what your ability, physically speaking, for work would be over the course of a 40-hour work week. In this situation, our client came in at a sedentary, part-time only. So it did show he did have some ability for work, but on a very limited basis. And most important for the argument was that, well, it's below the light duty requirement of his job. Even though, I always argue in my appeals that it's not purely the physical ability to do the job, but all the other things, and he had a lot of supervisory roles and things like that. But it gave us a really good base with which to argue that, hey, he can't do his job, and he's not going to be able to do, this occupation.
So you had a definition of disability, which was called own occupation, which was unable to perform the substantial material duties of his occupation. But you had the national economy portion, which meant how his occupation was performed in the national economy. So how long was that definition of own occupation going to last in this particular policy?
Like most policies, 24 months from the date of start of long-term disability.
So and then what was going to happen after 24 months to the definition of disability?
After that, then it would turn to, some other occupation based on your training, education, and experience.
Which would clearly be a more difficult definition of disability, that you'd have more stringent qualifications in order to get approved. So were you thinking about the next definition of disability as well when you did your appeal?
I was, and I think that's why we argued on the vocational aspect of it is high school graduate, basically been in this type of work most of his adult life. So the argument was going to become, what's the transferable skill? What other jobs would he be able to do that would fall into his, the definition of any occupation? So there was that. There was some concern that if it comes back sedentary part-time, but sedentary part-time is still, disabled. So on appeal, they did overturn the denial, put him back on claim for his own occupation. And then, it was less than a year later that they were already doing the review for any occupation. And during the course of that as well, updated medical records, filling out the education history form, and work history form with the client, and really continuing to try that theme we started in the appeal, that the only thing he knows was the job he was doing. And essentially, the only qualified job under any occupation would be his former occupation.
Now, did you also retain a vocational expert in this particular case?
In this particular case, we didn't. Just because when they were starting the investigation on it, it was a judgment call. It was McCline, did he want to spend the money on the vocational expert at that point? And we had built up a lot of good information, and Mutual of Omaha had been, for all intents and purposes, relatively quiet, and we just kept hitting them. They had their monthly claim forms, and we just kept hitting them with additional stuff. So in that situation, we didn't, and then it did transition, and we got an approval into the any occupation period.
Right, and I think it was because, and I remember when we discussed the claim, that their vocational review was so bad in terms of, and so not consistent with what his duties were, that we were able to use other third-party resources and make arguments in our appeal to overcome the vocational argument here. And then you mentioned that, whether or not he wanted to spend the money. It's important in all of our cases that we front all of the costs and everything like that, but if he were to win the claim, then there would be a reimbursement of those expenses. So it's still, though, even though there's no risk for him in laying out the money, it's something that he would have to pay back later, and that's a determination that a claimant, pros and cons of putting the money out now. And, if you can save the money, which we always want to spend as little as we have to on behalf of the clients. So in this case, you were basically saying, look, it can go either way, it's up to you.
Yeah, the cost-benefit analysis of it was something that, was even to our, at an even point to our favor on it, just because of everything that was done previously on it. And medically speaking, his condition was only getting worse, so it wasn't like, and Social Security's approved all these types of things. So I think it was in a situation with Mutual of Omaha. I was like, well, we're getting the offset now for Social Security. And, and this isn't always the case, but all the chips were kind of falling in order for him, leading into any occupation review.
And how do you continue to help him to protect his benefits as he stays on claim now?
So initially, I believe he transitioned into any occupation some time ago, in about 2016. After that, they were still every 2 to 3 months. Then we were able to get them transitioned to an annual reporting. So now we have them where they come back and they do a full-blown review every year. So we're always making sure with medical, he's getting treatment, he's still treating, all those types of things to make sure that there isn't going to be a problem. Because every time they've done a review and said we're continuing benefits, we get a letter within a week, new claims person. And as you know, anytime a new claims person gets on it, it's a fresh set of eyes, and they may be thinking, hey, how can I get rid of this case? Let's look into this one. If it stays with one claims person for a long time, sometimes it can fly under the radar, but when they're constantly shifting, it's always front and center in their mind.
And that's one of the downsides. Mutual of Omaha tends to spread the claims to multiple different people, and some of them are okay, some of them are lazy, some of them just say, let's do an IME, let's send the file out to somebody else, and that's where problems develop.
Yeah.
So. Well, if you're someone who has a Mutual of Omaha short or long-term disability insurance claim, feel free to reach out to Stephen, myself, any of our disability insurance lawyers. We'll immediately provide you with a free phone consultation. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you, and we look forward to speaking with you should you need us in the future. Hi, I'm Gregory Dell, the managing attorney of Dell Disability Lawyers, and I hope you find the video you just watched helpful. We put these videos out all of the time, and we'd love if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Beyond our videos on our YouTube channel, we also have lots of information available on our website at diattorney.com, and we encourage you to come to our website. The goal is that we want you to be educated about the disability insurance process, and when you get to our website, you'll see that we have information all about your specific disability insurance company, your occupation, and your medical condition. And we've designed our website such that you can easily search our website to find things that you may specifically be looking for. Now, at our website, we have thousands and thousands of pages of information, hundreds of videos that you can search, plus we're building a section of reviews of all the disability insurance companies, and we have the Ask Our Lawyer section where you can go ahead and ask us any questions that you may have. Now, we realize that you may not need us right now, but you may need us in the future to help you with your disability claim, and we think one of the best ways to keep in touch is by clicking the button below and subscribing to our channel. And most importantly, again, no matter where you live in the country, we're always available. Just go ahead and give us a call. We're happy to discuss your claim and let you know immediately if we can help you.